Hello, everyone. This is Gerard Robinson. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2022. This is the first of our Education, Culture, and Leadership series. As you know, during the school year, I get a chance to bring together people from across the country in different walks of life, both professionally and personally, to talk about an issue that we think is pretty important. Well, as we start off the new year, I can think of no better subject to talk about than libraries. I want to start off by saying that the number one mentor in my life, he unfortunately passed over a year ago, was a librarian at the community college where I attended. And if I can say there's one person who made a tremendous impact on me personally, but also understanding what library science meant and what information and getting into families. He was about moving books, ideas, and people beyond buildings and into communities. So I want to dedicate my work to him today. But that's one thing for me to say. It's another to actually have people who work in the system, both in cities, counties, local level, who walk across the boards and talk about this. You know, this idea came to mind in part with my conversation with one of the principals and leaders in a network that we have here at the foundation. And so I reached out to Katherine. Some of you, of course, know Katherine from her participation on previous events. For those of you who participate in our In Character event, of course, you know Katherine, because she's played a tremendous role in the last year and a half in bringing together over 130 educators for us to interview across the country. And guess what? She's done it again today, but she's also, in this instance, not only a client, but she's also a participant. And so with that, I want to introduce the speakers that we have today. So we have Mark Ray, we have Anthony Grisillo, we have Tish Calhamer, and she's going to, of course, correct me if I'm wrong on that, which is all right with me. I got Katherine Bassett and Celeste Bleu. I want to welcome all of you to the first of many events that will take place this month. And again, glad that you're here to join us for the new year. So first thing I do is really give everybody a chance to tell us who they are personally. And so my first question for Mark is, who is Mark and what is your journey to where you are right now?
That's a big question. I grew up in Washington State. I live in near Portland, Oregon, and I've pretty much lived here all my life. I think my story of my life has been, in spite of the fact that I had an opportunity to travel overseas and see the world, I've really been grounded in this community here in Vancouver, Washington. I grew up in the same district that I taught in for 27 years. And I continue to work in the community that I grew up in. So I'm not sure if that cues a John Cougar Mellencamp song or not, but very much grounded in the community that I still live in. I would say, you know, from a standpoint of culture and background, I did school very well. I had a very supportive home environment. As you can tell, I'm white and male. And really did school very well. And so my father was a teacher and my mother was a lunch lady and really had a very comfortable idea around school. I was successful in school. I got good grades. I was valedictorian. And up until really, you know, in the last 10 years or so, I didn't really look at that critically and recognize that there was just a lot of privilege and opportunity that I had that made that possible. And so I think one of the things that I'm working through as an educator here in the present is trying to understand what that privilege means and trying to kind of unpack that and understand in what ways do educators and other students look at school in different ways than I have. So I'm really excited about that right now. I think from a professional standpoint, I have never been more curious about education and really excited about some of the questions I'm asking and some of the answers I'm getting.
Great. I'm from California, so it's always good to see someone on the West Coast be a part of the conversation. So let's kick it over to you, Celeste. Who is Celeste?
Thank you again, Gerard, for inviting me here today. I'm so honored to be among so many amazing professionals. So my journey started a while ago. It feels like I've had a long educational journey to get to this point. It started by being raised by parents who were immigrants from Mexico. My grandmother, who I'm named after, came here with my grandfather and her family in the late 1970s, early 1980s. So I am a first generation American, and I grew up in a very small, poor, and even sometimes dangerous port town about an hour south of Houston. I also made pretty good grades in school and I loved reading, but because of financial and geographic circumstances, I couldn't really further my education the way I had always hoped to. But what I did know how to do was work and be diligent. This was a lesson that my stepfather, who I consider to be my dad, taught me through his daily example of going to work and working hard and living the American dream. And that's what I did. I worked full time and I went to school after work for several years. And there were some very difficult days when the school bill came or when I had to stay up several nights studying and go to work sleepy. But I am so fortunate to have had a wonderful support system. It's led by my husband of 11 years, who is my constant cheerleader. I've had great professionals in my life encourage me, one being the director of my library system since day one has encouraged me to continue my education. And now I'm the first person in my family to have gotten a bachelor's degree. And later this year, I'll graduate with my master's, hopefully with my newborn son, Colin, in my arms.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'm a first generation college grad as well, so those stories are important. And also worked full time, went to school 7 years, so good work. So let's go over to Anthony. Who was Anthony?
Well, I grew up right outside of Philadelphia here in southeastern Pennsylvania. So I'm a Philly guy, and with that comes all the good and the bad. But I grew up in a house where my dad was out of work most of my childhood, and my mom kept us with food on our table and stuff by teaching ceramics in our basement. So I was introduced to teaching that way. Eventually through my life, my dad finally actually got to be a supermarket store owner. He did find some success and get jobs and eventually was able to own his own supermarket. So I tell everyone I've had like 4 lives already. And my first life started in the supermarket business. I started working in supermarkets when I was 11 years old, and I retired at age 27 when I got my first teaching job. At the same time, during that time when I was going to college, because I loved school, I loved learning. I was always a good student, not always a great student, but I was always a good student. But when I got to college, I wanted to stay there forever because I just loved learning as much as I can there. And I was in college for 7 years, not because I couldn't, I wasn't doing well. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I started out as a pharmacy major, and then I decided that wasn't for me. And I ended up at a community college. And that's where I got bit by the teaching bug. All the while, I was a lead singer of a band that toured all over the northeastern part of the States. So that was my second life. And now, my third life was then teaching as a gifted support teacher for 16 years when I was named the Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year for 2014-15. And that's when I moved into the library. I mean, I love learning. That's my gist. And that's really what I bring to everything I do. I tell everyone, like, I don't feel like I'm anything. I realize I can be anything that I want to be. And that's kind of how I tackle everything in life.
Always good to see someone who understands the life of a grocery store. I started off as a box boy at a grocery store, had to clean the meat room, unload 18-wheeler trucks, all those fun things. So thank you for sharing your 4 lives. Last but definitely not least, we have Tish. Who is Tish?
First of all, thank you so much, Gerard and Katherine, for inviting me to join this conversation. My name is Tish Calhamer, and I was born in the Dominican Republic to a Dominican mother and a German-American father. And when I was a couple of months old, we moved back to my dad's hometown of LaGrange Park, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. And I always grew up surrounded by books, surrounded by music, surrounded by this life of the mind. My dad was a very brilliant man. If you're familiar with the board game Diplomacy, he was the inventor of that. Henry Kissinger's favorite board game, apparently. So just always, grew up with education being extremely important. On my dad's side, my grandmother, his mother was the first college graduate. She went to Northern Illinois University and then actually got a master's at Northwestern and was working on a doctorate, but never completed it. On my mom's side, I'm very grateful that she insisted that my sister and I learn Spanish. So we were raised bilingually. And that's really a gift, the gift to speak someone else's language, another language. And I think in this country, we do ourselves a disservice by starting, for the most part, learning a foreign language at age 14 when you're a freshman in high school. It needs to happen sooner, but I will get off my soapbox. So I grew up with this love of books and music, became a music major in college, and was not going to get a job anytime soon. So I decided I would go to library school. Again, I always loved books, loved helping people, and it really was a natural fit. It just clicked for me. And that's where I am. It was a road of just, filled with books practically every day of my life, and a love of learning and love of people, love of family. And that's what made me.
Well, thanks for sharing your story. In fact, we may have to get you and Anthony together, since you were a music major and he had a band. There could be something here. It's also worth noting that a number of people that we've interviewed in character, in fact, either majored in music or were a member of a band at some point prior to becoming an educator. And so while I said last but not least, it was over 4 people who are new to our show. We're now going to go to Katherine. Who is Katherine?
Thank you, Gerard, for having me as a panelist. This is really an honor to be sitting in this different seat. Who is Katherine? I think that Katherine is a lifelong education advocate and focused in really raising the voices of educators in policy, practice, and advocacy. I am a first-generation college graduate in my immediate family. I was pushed ahead twice in school, so I graduated from high school very young. My father selected the college that I attended, which was a Pennsylvania state school. He felt that I would be safe there, particularly being so young. I had no choice in going to college. I was not given an option. Education was very important in my family, and therefore it was very important to me. Again, I was not given a choice in that. I went to college to become a physical therapist. That was my dream. And in my freshman year, I encountered organic chemistry and calculus 1. And I discovered that I was not very good at organic chemistry or calculus 1. And in my family, C's and D's were not accepted. And I got a D in organic chemistry and a C in calculus 1. And so I sat down and had to do some hard thinking about what I wanted to do. And I decided to change my major. My roommate was a library media major. And she said, I don't know what you're doing all that science stuff for anyway. All you like to do is read. And that kind of brought me back to my youth and growing up in my family. I am the oldest of 5 children. I thought that my parents should have stopped at 1. They had perfection. Why keep going? And I was constantly surrounded by these younger siblings making noise. And so I would hide. I would hide in closets. I would hide in cubbies. I would hide behind the couch with books and a flashlight and read. In 3rd grade, I read War and Peace. In 4th grade, I read the Iliad and the Odyssey. And my 4th grade teacher discovered what I was doing, holding those books behind my math book or my social studies book or whatever book it happened to be. And she discovered that not only was I reading them, but I was understanding them. And so we started my first book club at lunchtime. And that love of reading has stayed with me my entire life. When I changed my major to library media, I did not intend to be an educator. The idea of standing up in front of a group of people, even little people, terrified me. And I thought that I would go into medical records librarianship. That didn't happen. When I graduated from college, I started working in a public library as the young adult librarian. And after a month, I was invited to interview for the position of intermediate school librarian in Ocean City, which is a barrier island community in southeastern New Jersey. They had never had a library program before. I was hired. I started their very first library media center at the age of 21. The room was bricks and bare walls and not even a roof at that point. And so I literally created the first library media center for that district. As time went on, I became the first librarian in Cape May County, New Jersey, of any kind of library to automate my library collection. And I did that by programming in BASIC on a TRS 83.4 for those who are old enough to remember that. And so when companies came to be like Winnebago, I was all set. I sent them my floppy disks and they were able to take my collection and move it into an automated collection. And libraries have been extremely important to me. I was the first librarian in my state to be named State Teacher of the Year and only the third in the nation at that time. And I'm so proud that Anthony and Mark and others have gone on to be named State Teacher of the Year as librarians. And that's, I guess, my story.
I always try to learn something new. And my youngest daughter, well, I guess probably all three of my daughters say a floppy disk. What is that? It's something that's wet? It's not floppy? No idea of the good old days. So all of you have shared personal journeys, very powerful, and thank you for opening up your life to all of us. Some of you have given us a glimpse into why you decided to join the library profession. You know, when I think about a librarian, the stereotypical one is not a man. And so that two men involved in the work is something unique. So let's start off with that for you, both you, Mark and Anthony. Not the first time you've heard it. Talk to us about not only just being a male in the profession, but your decision to say, yes, I'm going to become a librarian.
I appreciate you noticing that. I think the percentages are something like 80% of the school library profession, at least, is female, or as a percentage. I was very amused by being when I first started. My first job was as an elementary librarian. And being an elementary librarian as a male really is powerful because it kind of rocks kids' perceptions of what the library should be and what the librarian should be. And I had a lot of fun with that. I also came to the job out of retail, and so I wore suits. I really nice suits when I started teaching at elementary school. And I'm sure that also probably raised a few eyebrows at our at the elementary school. I discovered very soon that as the kindergartners started giving me hugs and the dry cleaning bills were mounting, I needed to change my outfit. So very quickly I moved from suits to a more practical clothes. But a little story about males in librarianship. We actually did a calendar of all the males in the Southwest Washington, Portland region called Men in Print. And we all posed, it was all legit. We were not naked or anything like that. So we posed next to a bookshelf or something like that. And it was a benefit for the Beverly Cleary Foundation. And so somewhere in my catacombs, I still have a copy of that, hard copy from probably 1990 something. But anyway, it is a really powerful thing. I think it gives an opportunity for people to kind of reset their thinking about what librarians should be and what they should look like and maybe how they should act. And that's no diss toward all the women that are in the profession, but it does kind of create a little dissonance for people. And I think that's really important.
Great.
As I started out as an education major, I was actually a secondary biology major. And I had a professor at Westchester University say, you should be an elementary school teacher. And I looked at her like she was crazy. But obviously she knew something because, I did switch down to being an elementary ed major. And that's actually how I started in getting into the library, because I was already a minority being a male elementary school teacher. And believe me, I had a lot of people, make assumptions and say things. And why would you want to teach that? And my favorite is always coming with a strong science and technology background. When people at the upper grades are like, why are you wasting your talents in elementary school? And I would just look at them and go, I don't know how to tell you this. It's harder to teach in an elementary school than it is at the high school. Okay. I've taught at all the different levels. I teach at the university, and I from that my experiences, I can tell you, I feel that it is definitely harder in the elementary school. When I had the decision to go into the library, it was mainly because that after being named teacher there, they wanted me to work with more students. And at that time I was gifted support, and I really couldn't see handling more paperwork because that's all special ed and there's a lot of paperwork. So I had that choice to get into the library, and I did that because I knew I would become the one person who works with every single student in our building. And all the other encore special areas in our building, they only work with 1st through 5th. I get to work through kindergarten through 5th. And I relish that fact. And it is sometimes strange when I go to a seminar or a professional development somewhere, and I walk in and I'm the only guy in the room. But it's never been much different than being the only guy in the room when I was in my classes at Westchester. So it really never felt strange to me. The story I like to share is shortly after, I actually replaced one of my best friends as librarian. She was a library tech. She didn't have a certification. So when we started to give grades, they phased out all the library techs and had to put certified teachers in there. So we were legally allowed to give grades in library. And we were still very close. Well, after she left, she went up to the middle school. So as the kids would leave the elementary school, they go up to the middle school, she would ask them all, so how's Mr. G as a librarian? And they're like, oh, he's great. He's so much fun. But he does the worst female voices when he does the read alouds. I just said, well, you know, I can't win them all. I can do a lot of different voices, but I'm really not good at doing female voices that great. So I do my best. But if that's the worst I do when I'm in here, I think I'm doing all right. But yeah, I mean, it's different than being here. I'm lucky that our local public library has Mr. Jason, and he is a fixture in all our kids' lives around here. So they're not just seeing a male librarian here at their elementary school, but they're seeing one at the public library as well. And we work very closely together. In fact, all the public libraries and our school libraries have a great relationship and like to do things together.
Thank you. 30 years ago, I began my career in education as a 5th grade school teacher in Los Angeles, and I'm still in contact with a few of my students. And I was not only the first male teacher they had elementary, but for some of them, the only male teacher. They had minus the PE coach or something else. And no disrespect to PE coaches, but I think you get the context in which I mentioned it. So Celeste, let's go to you. You know, when we were talking about this to prep, you already mentioned someone in your organization or the library system who encouraged you to get involved. Tell us a little bit more about that story and how it led to you being where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a lot of people encourage me. I was very fortunate. I was a very quiet student. So teachers, always try to help me be a little more open. But as a child, reading was so important to me. I had a love of reading just like everybody else. And I was asked to work in the school library when I was in 6th grade. And I didn't do floppy disks, but I did type catalog cards on the typewriter. And I remember the librarian, Mrs. Smith, and she was so helpful. She was so sweet. And when I was in high school, I also got another opportunity as my co-op to work in the library. And so naturally, I thought working at a library would be a good fit for me. So the year after high school, I applied for a job at my local library, and I became a shelver. But that was very short-lived. I moved up to the technical services department after that. 3 years later, I got married and I moved to New Mexico, and I became a school librarian. So I applaud all school librarians. It is not an easy job. I was very green, so I didn't last very long. But I came back to Texas afterwards, and I became a technology trainer for Harris County Library System. And I taught computer classes to seniors and adults for 5 years. And after that, I went to another branch to do programming. And now, 14 years after I was a shelver at that little city library, I'm now the assistant manager of programming for over 26 libraries in our county, in one of the largest counties in the United States. So it was all because of the people that believed in me. It was all because of the librarians that helped me get ahead, that offered me promotions, that believed in me, even though sometimes I didn't have the education for the jobs I worked in. But like I said, they believed in me and I worked and I proved myself and now I am where I am. I didn't have the normal start to education and to life, but through my work, I'm able to help other people like me succeed and support their families and guide other people, other young people to do what they dream to do.
Thank you for sharing. Tish, you talked about, you actually have a degree in library science, or you studied it?
Yes, I do have a master's degree in library and information science.
Walk us through that, because again, my mentor has one, but a lot of people don't know the process, the importance of it. For some of our listeners, they may be surprised to know that, oh, there's actually a degree in this. Talk to us why you decided to go that route, and then how are you using it today?
Well, excuse me, in a lot of libraries, getting a master's in an American Library Association accredited institution is the route to a professional career as a librarian. Usually you cannot advance in the field without it. But having said that, in the past, till about maybe the 1980s, for the most part, a lot of libraries were run by extremely capable, intelligent people who did not have the degree. It's really been a requirement, I would say, in the last 30 or 40 years. And now with the internet and online sources of information, that information science aspect was tacked on to the principles of librarianship. I decided to go that route simply because I knew that I was not going to be able to pursue a career in music. I was looking for something else to do. You know, I attended a couple of orientations and decided that I wanted to pursue it. Again, you know, I've always loved books. I've always liked helping people. I've always believed in education, and it seemed like a natural fit. You know, the argument, do you need the professional degree, occasionally, you know, pops up. I think people are not aware of just how complex the field is, and it's very, very wide and rich and diverse. Everything from school libraries to church libraries, there's medical librarianship, there's business librarianship. Even in schools, you know, there's the whole grade range. Public libraries, you can have very small rural libraries all the way up to, you know, multi-library county systems, and all the administration and personnel that goes along with that. So it really is a huge field, and people are not aware of it. If I may, I would like to take this time to encourage people of color to explore the field, because we are in desperate need of frontline workers that look like the rest of America. I'm grateful that I'm bilingual. I use my Spanish every day. But we have a lot of kids that come into the library and they see, you know, old white ladies for the most part. By old, I mean 30 and up. That's old to a 6-year-old child. And, you know, we really need to reflect, you know, the rest of our communities. I live and work in Elgin, Illinois, which is almost 50% Hispanic. We have a burgeoning Asian population, Laotian especially, African-American, Indian, Polish, and that needs to start to be reflected in our institutions.
Oh, thank you for sharing that and putting into context the diversity aspect, because in some ways, librarians get a chance to see more diversity walk through the door than sometimes we actually see in the classroom. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. She mentioned, you know, Tish mentioned rural. Katherine, when people think of New Jersey, they think of the big cities, they think of Newark and Trenton, they think everything urban, not realizing it's the Garden State for a reason. You worked in a rural part of New Jersey. Talk to us about that and being a librarian in the system of that nature.
I love what Tish just said about librarians being a pathway into multicultural education and needing more librarians of color in our field, particularly in our schools with our young people. So teaching on a barrier island in remote southeastern New Jersey, many of my scholars were children of well-to-do white families who owned boardwalk businesses, real estate businesses, etc. And many of my scholars were African-American scholars whose families had been brought to that island a generation prior to work in the hotels. And so we had quite a dichotomy in terms of poverty versus well-to-do, and a very small middle class, because to purchase real estate on that island was quite expensive. And so in my library, one of my goals, regardless of whether my students were from the lower echelon in terms of financial equity or the upper echelon, they were quite isolated. And I vividly remember one of the 8th grade English language arts teachers coming into the library and saying, "Give me everything you have on females of color, because my kids have no idea who Aretha Franklin or Ella Fitzgerald or Ida B. Wells is." And so that really helped me to build an extremely diverse collection. Our collection was highly reflective of every culture, of every race, of every ethnicity, and we made sure that our scholars were exposed to them all. I also started a guest reader program, and apparently it must have been quite a innovative thing at the time, because American Libraries Magazine, which is the flagship periodical for our profession, at least at that time, did a feature story on our guest reader program. We had over 150 guest readers in our building over the course of every school year. And on National Library Day, we would have all of them come back in one day and read to our scholars. So we had chefs, we had carpenters, we had nurses, we had, you name a profession, we had somebody. And they would come in and share with our scholars why reading was important in order to do the job that they did. And they came from everywhere, not just New Jersey. They came from every community that I could tap into, they came. And in this way, I was able to use the library media program to expand the horizons of my scholars, but I was also able to expand the horizons of our guests who hadn't been to this part of New Jersey, who didn't know that this part of New Jersey existed, who had never heard of a barrier island. And so we were able to bring the outside in and the inside out. And to me, as a librarian, that was one of the greatest gifts that I was ever given. I don't know if I answered your question. I apologize.
Oh, no apology needed. No, exactly what I was looking for. I want to pump the next question to both Tish and Mark. Interested in you telling us a little bit more about the organization where you work today, and tell us about one project that gives you that aha feeling, like, I'm so excited that we're doing this because it's making an impact. And so either one of you two can go first.
One thing that I'm really excited about, I'm the community engagement manager at Gail Borden Public Library in Elgin, Illinois. And in my role, I work with a team, and we bring programs and services that are designed to raise cultural awareness in our community. And one thing that we're able to do is we're able to respond to some current events that perhaps might not be addressed otherwise. For example, back in March of 2021, we had the awful mass shooting in Atlanta, Georgia. The workers in the salon. 8 Asian American women lost their lives, and right away we were able to put together a panel discussion with Asian American women from Elgin, And they talked about some of the racism that they had grown up with, that they still faced, their fears for their own children and families, what they wanted to see in the community. And they addressed some of the stereotypes that they also came across, things like Asian American women are submissive and quiet. And we actually called that program Not Submissive and Not Quiet, Asian American Women Speak Out. We have addressed extremism. We had a panel where, people discussed the rising influence of extremist groups like the Proud Boys. And I think that's one thing that public libraries offer is we're a safe space to have discussions, to have learning opportunities, where if you go out into the real world, it might be deemed insightful as an INCITE, not, whereas in the library it's insightful, INSIGHT. And we can bring that to people. People feel free to speak up. They know that they're not going to be censored or mocked. And I think that's really what's been one of the greatest joys in my professional career, is just making those opportunities come alive. And my team, we reach a lot of underserved people. We reach seniors that have been isolated by the pandemic. We reach school children who otherwise might not have access to databases and other resources. We bring together, all of the different cultural communities, and all the while just constantly pushing books, because literacy is what's going to get us there.
So my one of the organizations that I work with is Future Ready Librarians at All for Ed. It's an organization in Washington, D.C. And all of this, again, like Katherine and Anthony, as a result of being State Teacher of the Year in 2012 here in Washington State, new opportunities presented themselves. And so I remember very clearly our last get together with the various State Teachers of the Year. I was kind of in a dark place because I had just taken a job. I had left the library to become an administrator in our district and wasn't loving it. And I was like, all these other Teachers of the Year were just having all kinds of great opportunities. And I got this email from Follett, and they said, we're putting together this project called Project Connect, and we'd like to explore what the future of libraries looks like. And they invited me to be part of this group. And long story short is that group got together. We connected with superintendents and district leaders and members of ALA and so on, and got together in a couple of meetings, and all agreed that we need to have libraries. School libraries need to be part of the future of schools, and that kind of moved forward. And around that same time, in 2016, the Future Ready Schools initiative was launched by Obama at the White House. And so there was this new initiative where superintendents were really focused on innovation and change and kind of the power of systemic change to really change learning outcomes for students. And so I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And so I worked with a colleague at the U.S. Department of Education, and we came up with this idea of future ready librarians. It's like, how can we connect librarians to the strategic work that districts are doing around innovation? And so I had an opportunity to do a TED Talk in 2016 and kind of introduce this idea of future ready librarians. And long story short is that over the last 6 years, it has become a pretty significant community and initiative that really is kind of reframing some of the conversations around what school libraries can be in the United States. And so we've certainly looked at equity, we've looked at the challenges of censorship, we're looking at how librarians can support media literacy in schools. In what ways can they support, diverse collections? And so it's really been fantastic to be part of that. I think the pivot is with this pandemic, obviously there's been significant challenges in schools, and what does school look like in the present, and what is it going to look like in the future? And it's been really great to have this organization continue the conversation, thinking about what the future should be, rather than kind of dwelling in the present. I mean, obviously we have to solve some problems here in the present, but all of the conversations that we're having right now are really about where do we need to go next. And I think that's really important. Thank you.
Celeste, Anthony, same question. Deeper dive about your organization and the aha that keeps you excited.
I do want to throw out to Mark. I have your Future Ready Librarian poster hanging up in my library right behind my desk. So when you said that, I was like, yeah, we look at that every day. So it's a great idea. Celeste, why don't you go next? That way I'll get my thoughts together.
Sure, no problem. So I feel like I'm a part of so many great initiatives here. As I've mentioned, I'm a public service servant of the Harris County Library System, which, as I mentioned, is one of the largest counties in the United States, and it's one of the most diverse counties, if not the most. I think our judge, Lena Hidalgo, said there are 145 different languages spoken here. And one thing that has been difficult for our community is all of the natural disasters, all of the even the disasters in school that have gone on here in the Houston area. It just seems like thing after thing after thing have gone on, and now COVID. Our libraries have always been open, have always been warming or heating centers, have always been safe places. So when we were closed during the pandemic, it was quite shocking. It was very, very shocking. And I never thought we would ever close. I've been working in libraries when the electricity goes out, and I'm there with a pen and paper and a flashlight to get people the books that they need and the information that they need. But one thing that is wonderful about our staff and our community is how quickly we pull together, how fast everything was to get back on our feet, even though it's pretty devastating to have to close, to have to shut our doors. One of the projects I was working at, I was actually working still at a branch whenever the pandemic hit. This was in 2020, a couple of years ago. And I had just received a grant from the National Libraries of Medicine for a social-emotional wellness program for children and families. This was something that I worked hard on. It was one of my first grants that I did by myself. And it was really important to me because of all the children that we saw coming through our doors. The parents were coming in for information. Their families were devastated. So many families, even today, still do not have a home after Hurricane Harvey. So many, you would not even believe. And that's the national one. There have been so many other natural disasters that have happened since then. So these children that come in, sometimes I feel like they were left behind. So I created a program, a social emotional wellness program for them to learn breathing techniques, to learn ways to handle stress, to learn kindness, to learn empathy, to learn the difference between equality and equity. And of course, we had to close our doors, and very quickly I had to put it all on online on Microsoft Teams. But the amazing thing about that, and I know that a lot of librarians have seen this, is that it almost felt like we were able to reach so many more people. I had a student from Seattle, Washington come every week. He's a little 5-year-old, and I have such a cute video of him, learning this breathing technique and saying how much he loves breathing, how much it helps him cope. He didn't use the word cope, but how much it helps his brain declutter. And And that's one of the things that I'm really proud of that I did myself. But I'm a part of so many incredible projects, so many incredible grants now. Now that I work in the administrative side, we have several programs that are helping with the housing and the health and the education system to help with the American Rescue Plan Act for our government. We have another project called the Emergency Connectivity Fund, which will give 15,000 Chromebooks to family in need. We have a large early literacy project that our staff worked tirelessly on through the pandemic to be able to push out a couple of months ago. And after this, I'm actually going to go to a meeting hosted by the mayor's office to collaborate on ways to get education and jobs, to get Houstonians back to work. And I've just been a part of so many amazing things to help this community, to help the people that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and to help the people that just need help finding something. And I'm very proud of the work that we do.
I think my aha moment comes from the idea of starting out as a teacher of gifted students for 16 years. And when I first came into the library, I tried to be like the librarians that I experienced when I was a kid, right? Worrying about the Dewey Decimal System, worrying about, explore all these genres and stuff. And within my first year, I realized, wait, I don't have to change the way I teach at all. The library is a place to learn how to think, how to ask questions, how to take risks and explore things. And with my strong STEM background and like just my interest in science in general and learning and reading, just to be able to meld that all into the library was really my aha moment. I mean, I oftentimes refer to my library as the libratory because, we like to try things and fail and learn from those failures. I haven't abandoned the art of storytelling and read alouds, but that isn't the part of my library experience that drives what the kids do. Their interactions with each other. That's what drives what they do in my library. And my library's messy. My library's loud. My library, we don't say shh. I rarely say no. It's about trying to encourage them to explore anything they want to explore. And as Mark was talking about with the future ready stuff, just realizing that the library is still the place you can teach yourself anything. I get it. The first thing people go to is that phone and the internet and all that kind of stuff, but you still need books. You still need to research stuff. You still need to learn those skills to question things. There's too much misinformation out there, right? Libraries are the solution for that, to really try to help people learn to think, learn to question. I love telling the story about, I would bring in termites. And I'd put the termites and for them to observe with lenses and try to figure out what they were. And I had a student who wasn't the best reader. And he looked at them and immediately knew what they were. And I said, can you find the book in the library that can support your knowledge you already have? And he immediately went over to the insect guide that we had, pulled it out, showed everyone. And at that moment, this kid who wasn't always the best reader, the one with all the answers, he was the expert. And every kid in that class looked at him with just admiration and like, wow, this guy's just got it. And those are those moments that when I realized, all right, this is how to do it. This is how to teach in here. It's not worrying about that. And I get flack about that. I do get some people still like, well, you should worry about the Dewey Decimal System, or you really need to be exposing them to different genres. I said, look, I want to make sure I have a well-developed collection like Katherine was talking about. Like I really, really pride myself on going and finding those books to represent every type of student we have in our community and the ones we don't. Not only in who they see, but whose voice they're hearing, because that's equally as important, because you can't see what the author looks like, but you need to make sure they have authors they can relate to because they are like them. And that's a huge part of it right now. But at that same time, let them come in here and realize, no, you don't have to worry about what level you're reading at. That's another debate I have all the time. No, I will never level the library. I don't care what level you read at. Let's go find a book, try it. If it doesn't work out, bring it back. We'll find another book. And they're the discussions I like to have with the kids and have them have some great experiences to learn to use the library to teach themselves anything, and to also realize that they can go into any library and have that same kind of support and same kind of help from librarians. Because as the book, The Boy Who Was Raised by Librarians says, that's what we do. we help kids be the best that they can be, and people, adults, whoever, be the best that they can be and teach themselves whatever they want to learn. And we help them figure that stuff out. So that's really my aha moment.
Thanks, Celeste and Anthony. Katherine, same question for you.
I think that during my tenure in that intermediate school, information literacy, information power came to the fore. And that, coupled with technology, I think was a beautiful marriage. And being able to help scholars understand not only how to find information, but how to determine if that information was valid, was it reliable, was it dependable, was key to the teaching that I did in my library media center. Coupling that with technology and opening up the world to them, but also opening up to them the world of caution and recognizing the difference between a .org and a .gov and a .edu, and how does that help me determine whether or not the information that I'm accessing is real? Is it valid? Is it something that I can really depend upon? As a science major also, I love information power, information literacy, the way that it mirrors scientific principles, scientific investigation, and putting them together with technology was a huge aha moment for me. A second aha moment for me was when I left my library temporarily at first for 2 years to serve as an educator in residence at Educational Testing Service to develop the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards certificate in library media. Was a huge aha moment. I tried at least 8 times to say no to ETS because it's 2 hours away, one way from my home. So that means 4 hours a day in a car driving. That was not something that I wanted to do. And so I told them no at least 8 times, and they would not take no for an answer. And so I finally said, here's the deal. I'm going to come in person and tell you no. And when I went in person, they sat me in a room with the library media standards for the National Board. And I cried when I read those standards because I thought, if library media specialists can teach to these standards, which of course was the crux of the assessment that I was to help build, if we can teach to these standards, it will transform our profession. And I truly believe that it did help to do that. And so that was my second aha moment. And when my residency was over, I was asked to stay on and develop the EMC literacy certificate for the National Board, which I did. And that went hand in hand with the library media standards in my mind. And those are 2 aha moments for me that I will never forget. So they've helped to shape the trajectory of my career moving forward from there. And they also helped me to understand what a library media center, a library, whatever we want to call it, should be, can be, will be for scholars, and how it can make a difference in their lives.
Thank you, Katherine. So we're going to close by giving all of you an opportunity for a couple of minutes just to share what you want. I'm glad a couple of you talked about COVID and your response to it. That's been a part of our reality for nearly 2 years now. And so thank you for mentioning that. So we'll start with you, Celeste. Just some closing thoughts on what you think we should take away. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate to be a part of a large, one of the largest state-run organizations. So we talk a lot about this with my colleagues, and my director put it really well in a recent interview. He said, the library is a place where we can equalize the playing field, I believe he said. We not only promote literacy and the love of reading through our programming, but when we plan what we're doing in our libraries, we have everyone that comes through those doors, the tired mom, the out of work man, the elderly person that has no one else to turn to, the people online watching our streaming videos or reading a book, all of those people we have on our minds and on our hearts when we're creating, when we're innovating. Through our community focus, we're improving the quality of life to our current and our future customers. And as long as there's information, someone once said, there's going to be libraries, and we're going to be here supporting our communities proudly and happily.
And also thank you for sharing that you're going to be a part of a group. We're going to meet with the mayor's office to talk about adults in the economy. That's another aspect of the library that we don't talk about: economic development and professional training. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think as Anthony and Tish and Celeste and Katherine were talking, I think back to my TED talk, and the kind of the key question that I pose is, I think that people are very good at associating librarians and libraries with their past. The question is, do they see them as part of the future? And I think that all of the things that we've talked about today in terms of services and focus and so on really involve evolution and change within the library and librarianship. And so that's known to us within the community of librarians, and in some cases with educators. But there's also a significant challenge of perception outside of that community. I'm involved in a national research project that's going on right now that's looking at staffing patterns associated with school libraries. And what we're seeing actually is that there is a consistent decline in staffing and support for school libraries across the United States. It varies from state to state and certainly from community to community, but nevertheless, there is a slide in terms of support for those school libraries. And that's in spite of the fact that the stories that you're hearing today in terms of those successes and the reinvention of libraries, it has happened and is ongoing in response to the pandemic, as well as other challenges like media literacy and challenges of digital citizenship and so on. And so I think one of the things that I think that if you are listening to this is to recognize that school libraries are not what they used to be, and that they remain critical pieces of the solution for equitable and quality student learning in the future. And if you haven't already been to a school library, go visit one. Make an appointment to go in there and see what's happening in there, whether it's a makerspace or some new innovation that might be taking place. They're still really vital and very important, and yet they're very different from what they were back in the old days.
Thanks so much for providing the future look, the futuristic view, because you're so right. If you think of library, you go backward. You don't have to think forward. Very good. Katherine, closing thoughts.
I know that we've touched on this in many ways, but I would like to highlight the importance of libraries as cultural centers. So not only are our collections multicultural, but the programming that we offer, be we a public library, an institutional library, or a school library, we offer an extension of culture, not only of our communities, but beyond our communities, to our clients, to our citizens, whether they be children or adults. And I think that the multicultural aspect of libraries and the way that we can infuse that multiculturalism into the communities that we serve are critical.
Thank you. Let's go to Anthony.
I want to echo what everyone's been saying. It's not about looking back. It is about looking forward. The trickiest part of being an actual teacher librarian in elementary school right now is I have so many hats in this role because I don't have a library tech that helps me manage the library. So, with the pandemic, I lost all my parent help because we can't have parents coming in to help out anymore. I just did a book fair this year by myself, which I'm still not sure how I got through it. And I'm doing it again in the spring. So it's a job that I love doing because I love all the facets of it. I do love managing a collection. I do love researching new books that I need to get. I do love balancing a budget. I do like processing books, believe it or not. But I love teaching. I love storytelling. One of my favorite parts of my year every year is when I pull out my campfire. I have a fake campfire that I put in the middle of the room and we all sit around it. And I just tell them stories. And I tell them, we didn't have books always, but we've always had stories. There's always been stories. And they're all stories we can learn something from. And the kids love that moment. They appreciate that moment. And I really enjoy that moment. And then to tie that into the actual collection of books that they around. And when they look around, they think, there's a lot of books here. But I go, well, it's not a bad collection. I have the smallest collection in my district. Okay. There's no reason why I do. I just do. But I have the largest number of kids that in the district right now in the elementary school. So the funding piece of it is a really big challenge for everything because it's not only funding books, now it's funding ebooks and managing an ebook collection. Well, I learned that quick during the pandemic because we weren't giving out physical books anymore. And we had to figure out how to get an ebook collection like that and then how to maintain and manage that, which I'm still learning as we speak. But then to give the kids the opportunities to give feedback on what they want in their libraries and what things they want to experience, all of that. It's just a challenging, wonderful job. And yeah, it's important. And it's changing all the time, just like everything else in society is changing constantly. And the reality of it is the library is where you can try to stay on the crest of that wave, right? And not get swept under by it. So.
You've just given me a good idea about using a fake fire at our home and get everyone around to read. I had not thought about that. Appreciate it.
Well, I'll send you a link on how to make it.
Good.
Well, echoing and agreeing with what everybody else said, of course, I would just like to add that I think in this day and age, libraries really are the last bastion of democracy. And I think we add value to the community. We don't take away from it. And I was once asked by somebody, well, you just get paid to sit around and read all day. I wish that's not the case. We're teaching computer classes. We're manning the reference desk. We're, putting on programs. We're doing a lot of different things. And we continued to do those things, albeit in a different format, when COVID hit. We may have physically closed the doors to our buildings for a little while, but we still had our drive-up window. We still did curbside service. We actually delivered books to people's homes who weren't normally part of our, home delivery services program. We took all of our programs online. We still had conversation groups and concerts and discussions and lectures. We did all of that, and we figured it out in about a week. Illinois shut down around March 15th, 2020, and by March 18th or 19th, we had pretty much figured out how to proceed. So we do things, we do them quickly, we do them responsively, we do them responsibly. And another thing that that people sometimes say, well, what are you doing with my tax dollars? And I invite them to the library. Come on over and see. And whatever part of your property taxes or however they work in your state goes to the library, I guarantee that by the time you check out maybe 8 or 9 hardcover books, they're like $30 now. Maybe you check out a handful of DVDs, you've made your money back. Not only that, but you've got a free computer teacher. You've got a free copy machine expert. You've got free concerts, free movie screenings, free discussion groups, all of these wonderful things where if you start to total up the amount that you would pay, in the form of tickets or services, the public library, I think, is just the best bargain ever. And people don't understand that. And, they want to curtail our budgets. And we're already doing all of this on a shoestring budget with a skeleton crew. They want to get rid of school libraries, which I think is, a horrible idea. you can try and, keep us down, and we're going to bounce back up, and we're also still going to be nice, and we're going to be helpful, because that's who we are. We apologize all the time. We're very nice people. We really just want to help you, because if you don't have education is that building block. It is absolutely the basis of our democratic society. And if you don't have that, then you don't have democracy. And I think we all believe that, at our core. And it's definitely part of my passion. I want information and literature and culture to be available to everyone. Not just this person, that person, you or me, but everyone. And it might sound like a cliche. I might sound like I'm some sort of, Pollyanna. Look up who Pollyanna is if you don't know who that is. And it's what we really need to do, to make this world a better place. Again, it all sounds like, one big happy cliche, but I firmly believe it. And I think we all believe in it, and it's why we want to serve. And it's why libraries are there for you.
The answer that you and your 4 colleagues gave are just wonderful examples of why we titled this the impact of libraries on the culture of learning society, because it's not only what takes place inside the building, it's what people learn inside the building and what they're doing outside. And Anthony, as you mentioned, ebooks, whole different aspect of learning. Behind me is a yellow book, and it's called A Story to Tell. And it's a collection of 22 essays, 11 by men and 11 by women, who write about their experience of pursuing an education during incarceration. And the library for many of them was a saving grace, but the prison system in the state of Wisconsin now has that document on its e-library database for those who are incarcerated. So just an example of e-learning. Well, let me thank each one of you for being a part of this conversation. I know that I've got a couple of aha moments myself, including the fact that later today, I'm going to go back to our library. My 2 younger daughters, my wife and I have a membership, but I'm actually going to donate money so they can do some good things, because there's a couple of things that you said that I know in the absence of having money, it just won't get done, or an idea to push it. So that's number one. I'll also make sure that we have this link that I send in throughout the Albemarle County Library System in Virginia, where I'm located, but also send it to the University of Virginia library system. We have, according to some statistics, one of the best library systems, at least at the academic level in the country. Thank you again for your time. Thank you again for your vision. Thank you for opening up your personal, professional stories with us. Again, my name is Gerard Robinson. Thank you again for joining us for another conversation at the Center of Culture, Education, Leadership, where we talk about great things. Take care, everyone.